"Get out of my daughter's wedding, old man. Nobody wants you here." That's what my son-in-law said to me at the reception. I had paid for every last dollar of it while 200 guests watched in silence. I looked him in the eye, set down my glass of water, and smiled the way I learned to smile in the army when someone was testing you. Calm, certain, patient. "Son," I said quietly, "before I go, there are two people outside who've been waiting to meet you." He didn't know what was coming. None of them did. "I'm glad you're here with me today. Stay until the very end of this, and while you're watching, drop a comment telling me what state you're from. I want to see how far this story travels. My name is Raymond, and I'm 63 years old. I spent 22 years in the United States Army Infantry, 2 deployments overseas, 1 commendation I keep in a shoebox in my closet because I was never the type to hang things on walls. After I retired, I came back to Clarksville, Tennessee, the town I grew up in, and I bought a small house near the river with the pension I'd been saving since my 30s. Nothing fancy. 3 bedrooms, a yard with 1 good oak tree, a porch where I drink my coffee every morning at 5:30 the same way I've done since basic training. My wife, Carol, passed 4 years ago from a stroke that gave us no warning and no time to say the things we meant to say. She was 58. She was the kind of woman who remembered every birthday, fixed strangers' grocery carts that were rolling into traffic, and laughed at her own jokes before she finished telling them. After she died, I moved through each day the way you move through a building you're clearing methodically, quietly, watching for anything that might ambush you. My daughter Lily was my whole reason to keep moving. She was 31 when she got engaged to a man named Derek Harmon. Derek was 40, worked in commercial real estate in Nashville, drove a car I couldn't name the brand of because I'd never paid attention to cars like that, and wore the kind of watch you notice before you notice the man wearing it. He was polished in the way that takes effort to maintain. When Lily first brought him to my house for dinner, he shook my hand firmly, said, "Yes, sir," twice, and asked me questions about my service that sounded like he'd prepared them in advance. I told myself I was being too hard on him. Lily loved him. That was what mattered. "Dad, he's the one," she told me that night after he left, sitting across from me at the kitchen table with her hands wrapped around a mug of decaf. "I know you're protective. I know it takes you a while. But he's it, Dad. I can feel it." I looked at my daughter Carol's eyes, my stubborn chin, her mother's laugh, and I believed her. Because she had never in her life been a foolish woman. When Derek proposed, he called me the day before to ask for my blessing. That meant something to me. He said he loved Lily and intended to spend his life making her happy. I said yes, I meant it. What followed was 18 months of wedding planning that slowly, quietly drained me to nothing. It started with the venue. Lily had her heart set on an estate outside Nashville, a converted farm property with white fences and a barn they'd renovated into an event hall. $14,000 to rent for 1 day. Derek mentioned that his parents were going through some financial restructuring and couldn't contribute what they'd hoped. He said it with genuine-sounding regret, and I told him not to worry about it. That was my first mistake, not the money, but the reflex to reassure him before I'd had time to think. The catering came next. $80 a head, 212 guests. I did the math in the parking lot of the venue and sat in my truck for 10 minutes before I started the engine. Lily's dress was $6,000. I didn't know dresses cost that. I didn't say anything. I wrote the check. The florist was $3,200. The photographer was $4,000, the only one who really captures emotion according to the website. The band was $2,600. By month 8 of planning, I had pulled $7,000 from the retirement account I'd spent 2 decades building, taken out a personal loan at the credit union where I've banked since 1987, and started picking up Saturday work at a friend's landscaping company. My lower back had been giving me trouble since a hard landing during my second deployment. By December, it was giving me trouble every single morning. But Lily smiled the way Carol used to smile when something was going right in the world, and I kept writing checks. Derek, to his credit, seemed appreciative. He'd send me texts occasionally. "Lily told me about the deposit you put down, Raymond. That means the world to us." He always said us. I appreciated that. I thought it meant he understood what he was being given. I noticed the first thing wrong on a Sunday afternoon in February, about 4 months before the wedding. I'd driven up to Nashville to drop off a box of Carol's china that Lily had asked for serving pieces she wanted to use at the rehearsal dinner. Derek was supposed to be golfing. I knocked. No one answered. And since Lily had given me a key years ago for emergencies, I let myself in and left the box in the entryway. That's when I heard Derek's voice from the back of the house, low and easy, the way a man talks when he thinks he's completely alone. I wasn't trying to listen, but the house was small and the hallway carried sound. No, babe, it's fine. After June, everything changes. I've been patient. You can be patient a little longer. A pause. Because she doesn't know anything. That's why. Another pause, and then a sound I can only describe as comfortable, the tone of a man reassuring someone he's promised something to. I set the box down without a sound and left. I drove home telling myself there were 100 innocent explanations. A business deal, a difficult client, an old friend going through something. I had spent 22 years in the military learning not to act on incomplete intelligence, and I applied that same discipline to the next 3 weeks. I watched. I listened. I paid attention to things I'd been too polite to notice before. Derek's schedule had gaps that didn't track with his explanations. He canceled 2 dinners with Lily, citing work trips I later noticed he'd mentioned in passing as having already happened weeks earlier. He was careful the way people are when they've had practice being careful. 6 weeks before the wedding, I did something I had never done in my life. I hired a private investigator. Her name was Donna Rutherford, and she ran her practice out of a second-floor office in downtown Clarksville, above a tax preparation place. She had the kind of direct manner I respect. No theater, no promises, just questions and a notepad. I told her what I'd heard and what I suspected. She told me her rate and her timeline. I wrote another check I wasn't sure I could cover and drove home. "If there's something to find," she said as I was leaving, "I'll find it." She called me 11 days later and asked me to come in. The file she laid on the desk between us was not thick. It didn't need to be. Donna pulled out 3 photographs and placed them face up without ceremony. The first was Derek at a restaurant in Brentwood, seated across from a woman with dark hair and a composed, confident face. The photograph was dated 5 weeks ago, the same weekend he'd told Lily he was in Atlanta for a real estate conference. Her name was Angela Carr. 43, previously divorced, currently a partner at a property law firm in Nashville. Donna had gotten phone records. Angela and Derek had been in contact for 14 months. Based on the volume and pattern of communication, Donna said evenly, "This is not a professional relationship." 14 months. Lily had been engaged to him for 16. The second photograph was taken outside an apartment building in the Germantown neighborhood. Derek, coming out of the building at 7:15 on a Tuesday morning, buttoning his jacket. Donna identified the apartment as belonging to a woman named Casey Lindell, 29, who worked in mortgage lending and who had apparently been told that Derek was separated from his fiancé and in the process of breaking off the engagement. I sat with that one for a while. The third thing Donna placed on the desk was not a photograph. It was a printed document, 2 pages, from a legal consultation. Derek had met with a divorce attorney in Memphis, quietly, using a work trip as cover. The consultation was dated 8 weeks ago. He had inquired about asset division laws in Tennessee and asked specifically about the timeline required before filing. "He's planning to marry her," Donna said, "and he's already mapped out the divorce." I asked her whether the women knew about each other. She said Angela believed she was the serious relationship and that Derek was marrying Lily under family pressure. She said Casey believed Derek was nearly out of the engagement and would be free by summer. Neither woman knew about the other. I drove home that night and sat at my kitchen table until 2 in the morning. In the Army, there's a concept we called the cost of inaction. Sometimes the most dangerous thing a soldier can do is nothing. I kept thinking about Lily signing a marriage certificate with a man who had already consulted a divorce lawyer. I kept thinking about Carol, who would have known what to do immediately and would have done it without a moment of doubt. I kept thinking about all the money, not because money is the point, but because every dollar I'd given represented something I'd decided Lily's happiness was worth. And he had looked at all of it and seen an opportunity. I called Donna in the morning. "Can you get both women to come to the wedding?" I asked. A pause. "That's a significant ask, Raymond." "I know what I'm asking." She was quiet for a moment. Angela is angry. Casey is hurt and looking for answers. Neither of them wants to be made a fool of. Another pause. I can reach out. I can't promise. Tell them the truth, I said. Tell them there's another woman they don't know about. Tell them the man they've been seeing has been using all three of them at the same time. Tell them my daughter is an innocent person about to make the worst mistake of her life, and tell them that I am asking for their help. Donna called back the following day. They would come. The morning of the wedding was June 9th, a Saturday, dry and warm, the kind of Tennessee morning that looks like a photograph before anything goes wrong. I put on my dress uniform. I had not worn it in 4 years, not since Carol's funeral, where I'd stood at the graveside in it because she had always said she loved the way I looked in it, and I'd wanted her to see it one last time, wherever she was. It still fit. That felt important for reasons I couldn't name. I arrived at the estate an hour early. The white fences were wrapped in ribbon. The barn looked exactly like Lily had described in every planning conversation for a year and a half. The florist was setting up arrangements along the entrance path, flowers I had paid for, in colors Lily had chosen. I stood at the edge of the property and let myself be proud of it for exactly 3 minutes. That's when Derek found me. He walked over from the direction of the barn with 2 groomsmen flanking him at a distance, like it was choreographed. He'd been drinking already, not enough to show it in his walk, but enough to show it in the way he held eye contact a half-second longer than necessary. He looked at my dress uniform with an expression I'd seen before on men who want to diminish something they can't quite dismiss. "Raymond," he said. "No, sir. No greeting. Just my name," like a threshold he was crossing. "Get out of my daughter's wedding, old man. Nobody wants you here." He said it clearly. Not loudly. He was smart enough not to make a scene before the scene he'd planned. But clearly enough that the 2 groomsmen heard it, and the florist 3 feet away heard it, and I heard it with the full understanding that this was not an impulsive insult. He had thought about this. He had decided I would accept it, leave quietly, and the day would proceed without the complication of a father who'd been paying attention. 22 years of military service teaches you what to do with anger. You do not perform it. You contain it, clarify it, and use it at the exact moment it serves the mission. I smiled the way I used to smile when a superior was testing my composure. "Son," I said quietly, "before I go, there are 2 people outside who've been waiting to meet you." The overconfidence in his face shifted by 1 degree. I sent the text to Donna. Now. I walked toward the barn, past the ribboned fences and the flower arrangements, past the guests who were beginning to arrive in their good clothes, carrying envelopes with money inside. I took my seat in the front row. Lily's aunt leaned over and whispered that I looked handsome. I thanked her. Lily appeared at the back of the barn 20 minutes into the ceremony. On the arm of her Uncle Derek had told her 2 weeks ago that it would look more contemporary if a family member other than her father walked her in, since I was so formal and might make it feel military. She'd agreed, believing it was a stylistic choice. She was wearing Carol's grandmother's pearls and a dress I had paid for, and she was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen in my life. She was beaming. Completely. Genuinely. Unsuspectingly happy. The minister was a warm man with gray hair who had clearly done this many times. He moved through the opening with practiced ease. Derek stood at the altar looking confident, having successfully removed me from the processional and apparently believing he'd removed me from the equation entirely. The minister reached the moment. "If anyone present has reason why these 2 should not be joined in marriage." I stood up. The barn went silent the way rooms only go silent when something has changed that cannot be changed back. Derek's jaw tightened. He looked at me the way you look at a situation that has departed from your plan. "I have reason," I said. My voice carried. "Military training again. You learn to project from the diaphragm, to speak for the people in the back. And I am her father. Which means I have the only reason in this room that matters." 200 guests did not breathe. "Before my daughter makes a permanent promise to this man," I continued, walking slowly toward the center aisle, "I think she has the right to know that Derek has been in a serious relationship with another woman in Nashville for the past 14 months, and a second woman in Germantown who was told he was free." The sound that came from the room was something between a gasp and silence, the 2 things arriving at once. Derek stepped forward from the altar. This is completely insane. You've lost your mind, Raymond. I don't know what you think you. The barn doors opened. Angela Carr walked in first. She had the bearing of a woman who has decided to be brave today regardless of how she feels. Behind her came Casey Lindell, younger, her expression a mixture of fury and hurt that she wasn't quite managing to contain. Donna walked behind them both. Derek's face did something I have no word for. It collapsed and reassembled itself in under 2 seconds, but I had been trained to watch faces, and I saw it happen. "Derek," Angela said, stopping at the center of the aisle. She addressed him directly, not the crowd. "You told me Lily was a name on a piece of paper. You told me by September we would be living in the house in Franklin you showed me in March. You told me you loved me." She pulled out her phone and held up the screen so that the people in the first 4 rows could see it. "Those are your words. I have a great many more of them." Lily made a sound I recognized from the night Carol died, a sound a person makes when the ground moves under them. Casey spoke next. Her voice was quieter but steadier than I expected. "He told me he was single. I've been dating him for 7 months. He met my parents in April. He told them he was looking forward to getting serious." She looked at Angela, then at Derek, then at Lily. "I didn't know about either of you. I want you to know that." The minister stepped back. Literally stepped back a full pace. Derek turned to the crowd and made one final attempt at the version of himself that had always worked before. "This is obviously a coordinated attack by a man who never accepted me. These women don't know each other." "Lily, you know me." "I have documentation," I said. I reached into my jacket, my dress uniform, the one Carol loved, and pulled out the folded pages Donna had printed. I did not wave them. I did not perform with them. I simply held them where the room could see them. "Derek consulted a divorce attorney in Memphis 8 weeks ago," I said. "He asked about asset division under Tennessee law and about the minimum timeline before filing. He had not yet married my daughter. He was already planning to leave her." The room erupted. It wasn't chaos exactly, it was the sound of 200 people processing something at the same time in the same space. Derek's composure cracked in a direction no one predicted. He turned on me, and what came out of his mouth confirmed everything he'd been hiding. "You have no idea the position you've just put me in," he said, his voice dropping to something raw and unpolished. Nothing like the practiced version. "This merger, the Franklin deal, the contacts I needed through her firm, do you understand how long I've been building toward this? You just threw all of it away because you couldn't mind your own." He stopped. He heard himself. Every person in that barn heard him. Lily, who had not moved from the spot she'd stopped at when the doors opened, looked at her almost husband for a long moment. I watched my daughter's face move through something I will never be able to fully describe. Recognition, grief, and a kind of cold clarity arriving all at once. She removed the engagement ring. She set it on the edge of the nearest pew with a deliberateness that was more devastating than throwing it could have been. "Please leave," she said to him. Just that. Derek stood at the altar of the wedding I had paid for and seemed to understand for the first time that there was no version of the next 5 minutes that worked in his favor. His groomsmen were not moving to stand beside him. His parents, who had flown in from Charlotte, were seated in the second row looking at their son, with an expression I recognized from Command, the look of people who have just learned something true that they will not be able to unknow. He left. He walked out of the barn without another word, and Angela and Casey moved to separate sides of the aisle to let him pass, which was the most dignified thing I saw anyone do that day. The room was completely still. I walked to my daughter. She was standing alone at the front of the barn with 200 people watching and the June sunlight coming through the barn windows in long slanted bars, catching the dust that the whole event had kicked into the air. "Dad," she whispered. "I've got you," I said. She walked into my arms the way she used to walk into them when she was 7 years old and had fallen off the backyard fence, and I held her there in front of everyone without caring even slightly what it looked like. The minister quietly asked if guests might give the family a moment. The room emptied with a gentleness that surprised me. People are better than you expect them to be, sometimes when a situation is real. In the months after, people asked me if I regretted the public confrontation. My neighbor Ray asked it over the back fence. Lily's aunt asked it in a phone call. Even Donna asked it, once, over coffee in her office 3 weeks after the fact. My honest answer was no. But I'll tell you what I did feel. I felt the weight of the loans every month when the statements came. I had borrowed more than I want to say to fund a wedding that lasted 45 minutes before the truth dismantled it. My retirement was thinner than I'd planned for. My back still woke me up at 3 in the morning. None of that had changed. What changed was Lily. She stayed with me for 6 weeks after the wedding in her old bedroom with the window that looks out at the oak tree. She barely spoke for the first week. Then she started talking, slowly and then all at once, the way grief moves when it finally decides to move. She talked about things she'd ignored, moments she'd explained away, the way Derek made her feel subtly embarrassed about her father's house, and her father's work, and her father's life, in ways she hadn't let herself name while she was in it. "I think I knew," she told me one evening on the porch. "Not the specific things, but I knew something wasn't solid. I just wanted the solid version so badly that I argued myself out of what I was feeling. I didn't say anything. She wasn't asking me to. She got an apartment in Clarksville by September, closer to me than she'd lived since college. She started working with a therapist she found through her company's benefits plan, and she talked about it plainly, the way her mother used to talk about going to the doctor not as a struggle, just as a thing you do when something needs attention. I started teaching a twice-weekly workshop at the community center through a veterans program, Basic Financial Literacy for men and women transitioning out of service. It wasn't a second career. It was something to do with the mornings that wasn't just coffee and silence. One Saturday in October, Lily came over and we repainted the porch. We'd been meaning to do it since Carol died and somehow hadn't. We put on the Braves game, and Lily mixed the paint the wrong shade of gray. And we used it anyway, and agreed it looked fine. It did look fine. It looked like something we'd done together, which is better than perfect by most measures. A man named Gil started volunteering at the community center around Thanksgiving. He was 44, former Marine, currently teaching high school history, the kind of steady and unhurried that you notice before you notice anything else about a person. He and Lily started talking after a veterans event in November. I'm not going to say more than that because it isn't my story to tell. What I will say is that I've watched him pay attention to her the way an honest person pays attention, present, consistent, unperformed. I thought about Derek Harmon occasionally in the way you think about a wound that's fully healed but left a slight pull in the scar tissue when the weather changes. I had no anger toward him anymore. Anger costs more than it returns, and I had a budget to maintain. Donna told me in a message around Christmas that Derek had relocated to Atlanta. She didn't say more and I didn't ask. One Sunday morning in January, I was on the porch with my coffee when Lily's car pulled into the driveway. She came up the porch steps and sat across from me in the wooden chair that used to be Carol's, wearing her mother's old flannel jacket that she'd claimed from the closet a decade ago, and we watched the neighborhood come awake without saying much. After a while she asked, "Do you ever think about the money, like all of it?" "Sure," I said. "Are you angry about it?" I thought about that the way she deserved to have it thought about. "I'm in my 60s, I said. "I've watched people I care about leave with no warning and no time to say what needed saying. I've spent 22 years in situations where I understood very clearly that you don't get to make the same choice twice." I looked out at the oak tree in the yard, the one I'd been meaning to trim for 2 seasons. "So, no, I'm not angry about the money. I knew what I was spending it on. I was spending it on you. The money went to the wrong event, not to the wrong person." Lily was quiet for a moment. "That's the most dad thing you've ever said," she said. I laughed, which surprised me. It surprised her too, and she laughed back. And for a moment, the porch sounded like it used to when Carol was on it. People ask me what I would have done differently. I would have noticed sooner. I would have watched more carefully in the early months when the small inconsistencies were just inconsistencies and hadn't yet organized themselves into a pattern. I would have trusted my instincts on that Sunday afternoon in the hallway instead of spending 3 weeks arguing myself out of them. I would not have paid less. I would not have loved less. I would not have asked my daughter to want smaller things so that my risk was smaller. The loan payments will be done in 2 years. The retirement will be leaner than I planned. The porch is painted the wrong shade of gray. The oak tree needs trimming, but I keep leaving it because it's been there longer than anything else in the yard, and it knows how to take care of itself. Some mornings, I think about Carol, about what she would say if she could see where we landed. I think she would say we landed right. I think she would say that Lily's laugh sounds like hers, and that the wrong shade gray porch looks fine, and that a man who spends his last good years protecting the people he loves has spent them correctly. I think she'd be proud of us. Now I'm curious about you who've stayed with me until the end. If you were in my place, what would you have done? Have you ever had to protect someone you love at a real cost to yourself? Tell me in the comments. And if you haven't already, drop the state you're watching from. I want to know how far this story reached. I'll see you in the next one. Sometimes the most important thing a father can do isn't write a check or show up in a uniform. It's simply refuse to look away when something feels wrong. Raymond lost money he'll spend years recovering, but he kept the one thing that can't be borrowed or repaid, his daughter's trust. Protect the people you love with everything you have, and don't wait for perfect certainty before you act. A small note for you, this story was created and fictionalized by AI, shared here for your entertainment, and in the hope that the lesson inside it stays with you long after the story ends.